The Cacoward, an annual celebration of the best and brightest of the Doom modding community. For me, it's a fantastic opportunity to check in and catch the many quality entries that inevitably slip through my net. It's also an opportunity to feel smug about how many mods troubling the top 10 that year that I've actually managed to ping on my radar. In that regard, I'm very happy to see Knee Deep in Z-Doom, Elementalism Phase 1 and Overboard all making the grade, very well deserving in my humble estimation, but what of the rest? Well, as luck would have it, I've just spent the first week or so of January absolutely mainlining everything I've missed over on my Twitch channel. Hopefully the archived version should be up over on Icarus live streams by the time this video comes out if you want to check out the full whack playthroughs, but for those of you with more constrained time allowances, fear not. This here video will seek to boil down my experiences with the Caco Award winners here into a more handy, bite-sized format. So, without further ado, let's get busy, shall we? Oh boy, the Magenta Spire. They sure as heck picked a doozy to begin with on the list here, didn't they? This is a 16 map, 2-episode acid trip of a WAD that throws a lot of conventional wisdom out of the window, and while it's at it, assaults your eyeballs for good measure. It's certainly not going to be for everyone, and if I'm going to be perfectly honest, it certainly wasn't for me. It reminded me quite a lot of Lilith, albeit a heck of a lot more playable than Lilith, and to its credit, hits the ground running and only picks up speed from there. It honestly throws a lot at you, even throughout the course of just its first episode, which escalates to an almost exhausting degree. You've also got to contend with tweaked enemy attributes, some custom enemy types such as flying imps, and a host of other dehacked tweaks. So in general, you're not really going to be able to rely on a lot of stuff that you typically take for granted here. I mean, one thing that just endlessly tripped me up was the fact that certain mundane floor textures were now herd floors. I mean, stuff like standard computer textures. What the heck? I'm going to be honest, I don't think this is a WAD for the average Joe. This is a WAD I'd say more geared towards the person who's much more well versed in the ins and outs of modding, mapping, dehacked work. The kind of WAD where if you've got a bit more insight into what's happening under the hood here, the more appreciation you'll have for it. Personally speaking, I do skew more towards the side of the average Joe, and boy, did this one just end up exhausting the heck out of me by the end of its first episode. Trust me when I say, it gets slaughtery as all heck by that point. And as for episode 2, I only managed to get a few maps deep into that before I tapped out and said, you know what? I think I've had my fill. Shifting gears almost entirely, we land on JumpWAD. This was literally a sight for sore eyes. Coming immediately after the Magenta Spire, this dispenses with any garish visuals, or even enemies or weapons for that matter, instead dedicating its levels to the pursuit of collecting gems, the larger of which eventually unlocking an exit. Naturally, this is achieved with the assistance of jumping, hence the name, and just results in this remarkably zen experience. Well, at least zen is the attitude you should approach it from, because there are points where you'll just outright enrage yourself after failing the same simple-looking jump for the dozenth time. There are 7 levels here for you to explore, each of which bringing their own theming and style to the table, so there's definitely something new and interesting to look forward to with each successive completion. Not to mention, each level in itself adds an extra additional wrinkle to the proceedings as you get deeper in. 3rd level, for example, will include these speed ramps that you can catapult yourself off. The 4th level will have one-way systems that'll drag you back if you fail a jump, and quite possibly my favorite during the course of the 5th level, which is about as deep as I got, are these exploding jump gems, which adds just an extra dimension to how you attack these environments. And I was absolutely blown away by the knowledge I discovered at one point that I don't have to stop my jump from the ground. I can be mid-air and then trigger the jump, and it still counts. So the possibilities evolve as you experience more of it. And I love that feeling, like I'm learning something alongside my progression of the WAD. Would recommend, quite enjoyed it, even if I was endlessly tripped up by the fact that jump was bound to mouse 1, but hey, you can always remap that if it bugs you. After the drastically varied pacing of the first 2 entries on this here list, it's nice to see that Ozonia a 32 map megawad that's apparently third in a trilogy that I tragically hadn't heard of until today, known as the Moonblood series, is much more even-keeled. If you need a general sense of what Ozonia is shooting for, its influences are cited as the likes of Eternity, Ancient Aliens, and Back to Saturn X. That latter one, definitely something that I feel the influence of greatly throughout the course of these maps. Truth be told, megawads like Ozonia, Eternity, Back to Saturn X are an absolute nightmare for me to talk about because they exhibit such a high degree of quality and polish, evenly spread throughout their runtime, that it's difficult sometimes to pick out anything in particular, and my brain just devolves into some kind of inarticulate mush that can only describe the overall experience as pretty enjoyable. But yeah, overall it speaks to just the really solid construction of the levels, the really well-considered placement of the enemies as well. Never truly going overboard with the placement, but in fact leveraging the aforementioned construction of the levels and some choice placement of heavy hitters that proves that you don't need to overwhelm the player with a horde of enemies in order to generate challenge. Sometimes less is more. Sadly, I didn't get through all of Ozonia, instead only managing to complete its first episode, but on the strength of that alone, I am now quite interested to see what the lion's share of the Moonblood trilogy has in store for me, as well as the rest of Ozonia. Well-paced, well-constructed, really visually pleasing, and quite delightful in the choice of midis throughout the course of the maps too. As they said on the Doomworld article, delightfully jazzy. Oh man, Dust Devil was an absolute treat. This is a map with a central conceit revolving around the retrieval of an artifact blade. It's summoned all of the demons, everyone is dead, yada yada yada, you know the drill. What makes this unique, however, it's actually two maps masquerading as one. So, as is usually typical with the style of large singular maps, it revolves around the collection of multiple keys, but in order to retrieve these keys, you've got to fight your way through the base to a teleporter, which will take you to a ruined desert temple, whereupon you can then retrieve the key, come back to the base, and unlock successive sections. Each key will have you going back to that temple. The temple will then open up, and you'll find yourself facing escalating opposition. And honestly, the aspect of this that blows my mind so much is how it manages to track your progression between these two separate maps that now function as one. My brain, it's melting again, oh god. But yeah, this one leverages quite a lot of GZ Doom features in order to achieve its feats. And out of all of them, I have to say the most terrifying by far has to be the genesis of the chain gunner on a drone. This is a sound that's going to be haunting my nightmares, and it's the sound of those goddamn things trying to hunt me down. Visually, quite like the look of it, appropriately dusty, well, not so much in its initial more Quake-inflected tech-based section, but certainly so when you get into the ruined temple area of its alternate map. Furthering the links to Quake, there's also an alternate enemy type here that's basically the ogre, which can launch bouncing grenades. I hate it. Beyond that though, a more fun addition you'll find during the course of Dust Devil will be the Rage Sphere. How does 2 times the fire rate sound? Nope, don't answer, I'll tell you. It sounds like a chain gun going... Overall, a lot of fun, a little overwhelming on ultra-violence difficulty for a first-time playthrough, but still, it's leveraged with real fun design, real interesting encounters, and a few real interesting boss fights. Real interesting variant of a cyber demon to contend with. That said, the Shielded Barons, god, that took me entirely too long to figure out if I was even dealing any damage at all. But yeah, another easy recommendation for me here. Would probably recommend Hurt Me Plenty on a first-time playthrough before dialing it up. And even better, it's not a massive time commitment to blast through either, taking around an hour depending on your own personal pace. And what can I say, even though it technically isn't, I'm a sucker for these like single complex map constructions. Doubly so when they're pulled off this well. Psst, hey kid, you like brown? Well, guess what? Don't Turn Your Back on the City is a map roughly 95% comprised of that particular color or shades thereof. But don't let that put you off. because even on the most basic level here, Don't Turn Your Back on the City is a really fun map to play through. Well-structured encounters, intricately flowing level design. It's short, it's sweet, delivers a decent amount of challenge, but once you look beyond that, you start to notice just how opulently, maximally designed a lot of this level's environment actually is. It is rife with accent detail. It's the kind of thing where the more you look, the more you'll find. And good God, I just weep at the idea of how many sectors this map must have. See that? See that right there? That's a Doom cute chandelier and it's friggin' awesome. Not just that, however, but you'll also find smaller details littered throughout that just further bring the level to life. I'm also particularly a fan of how this level uses certain textures to just absolutely make a room pop. And with that, I mean the usage of things such as this blood red carpet here. It just really brings the room together. And you know what astonishes me the most about all of this? This is a debut map. It's ridiculous. It's disgustingly good. And yes, even if you have an aversion to brown, you should absolutely give it a play. Malevolence. This one's pretty neat. It's a 9-map single-player episode that pits you against an evil super AI of the same name and its cyborg army. Freely admit, I'm a sucker for these kind of setups, especially when they're presented in a fashion that makes you feel like you're developing some kind of antagonistic relationship with the AI in question. That said, where other notable examples of this trope will have more overt interactions, think the constant goading of Shodan during the likes of System Shock, Malevolence instead delivers the malevolence of Malevolence through more environmental touches, and still manages to be reasonably effective for the effort. It certainly doesn't hurt that outside the presentation of the central conceit, there is an absolutely fantastic collection of varied, inventive, and challenging levels here in Malevolence. Particular standouts include Midnight Express, a absolutely delightful train level encompassing not one but 2 parallel locomotives which you can be catapulted across thanks to handily placed jump pads, and another that really wowed me was Terraforming Station, which pulls a absolutely delightful trick during the course of many sections where a previously wintry scene will be suddenly transformed into much sunnier, greener climes. So yeah, presentation-wise, Malevolence is absolutely brilliant for the vast majority of its running time. As for the combat, it is pretty challenging indeed. Pitted against a custom cyborg army, Malevolence will quite frequently make you sweat. Thankfully, the arsenal that you've got to use here is also suitably beefed up. Additions including burst fire for the assault pistol, a much faster fire rate on the shotgun, a napalm launcher with fast-firing rockets, and when it comes to the BFG replacement, yeah, this one might not be spitting plasma, but it's sure as heck spitting napalm. But yeah, overall, Malevolence is an easy recommend. Absolute roller coaster of a one. Final entry on my catch-up is the 10x10 project. This is an interesting one because I think I appreciate this more for the concept than I actually do for the gameplay. In that regard, 10x10 consists of a limitation that only allows the author to use a set of 10 textures and 10 flats. If you're not sure what a flat is generally a texture that is used for the ceiling or the floor. Each of the 12 maps here is preceded with a room that presents all of the textures used within the map in question. But once you get into the maps proper, it's often easy to forget that the limitation is even in place, considering the creativity with which these textures are combined. As alluded to earlier, the gameplay didn't really do so much for me, but this was coming directly off the back of Malevolence, so I was possibly feeling ever so slightly burned out by this point, but 10x10, even then, is a project that's quite nice to regard just for the aesthetic, just for the look, and if you're in that kind of mood, why not indulge your inner tourist by pairing it with Tourism Deluxe, or if you don't want to go that far, simply toggling No Monsters. A fascinating exercise, indeed. So, I guess that about wraps it up for me and this Cacoward catch-up for the Cacowards 2022, but that need not be the end of it if you're eager to discover more. You see, over on the Cacowards page, which you can find at doomworld.com/Cacowards, not only will you be able to dive into the additional categories present for this year's awards, including runners-up, multiplayer awards, gameplay mod awards, and much, much more, but you will also be able to browse the comprehensive archive of previous year's Cacowards, stretching all the way back to 2004. In any case, it's good to be back after my self-imposed hiatus over January, and at the very least, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what your favorite Cacoward entries turned out to be this time round, and until next time, this has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.